Hello, beautiful Zinta. How are you today?
I am good. It's a Monday morning in Brizzy and it's hot. I don't even know what I'm doing wearing this. I'm in air conditioning. It's all good.
Wonderful. I love your energy so much. And it's to introduce you to all our audience as one of my mentors and a lawyer who's been able to transition from a more traditional practice into something much more interesting and collaborative and wonderful. But before we get into that, of course, my audience are people who are facing a challenge at the moment. And so if you have faced a time yourself, or even just an example of clients that you have when they're under excess stress, when they're dealing with a challenge like a legal challenge or some kind of huge thing in their lives, what did you call on, or what do you see people call on to get them through?
Such a great question, because I think in my past law life, I would call on things that weren't actually necessarily the best thing for me, like a little bit too much wine at night, or just having that kind of, thing regularly, not focusing on my, exercise and those sorts of things. So I think really, as a result of going into this collaborative work that I'm doing and being exposed far more to that holistic, approach of having, getting people to a place, clients and lawyers to a place where we can make really good, rational, measured decisions about a future that might be uncertain. When is it ever certain? But, all of those things, I'm so much more aware of the need now to really knuckle down to doing those basic things if you're under stress. So the basic things for me are making sure that I'm getting sleep. Sleep is your number one thing that you've got to really take care of. So just doing whatever I can if I've got a massive stress load on, and I have had a pretty taxing year this year, so I can absolutely attest to using these things as assisting me get through, that time. So getting my sleep sorted. So that may mean some kind of sleep routine, even if it means having a warm shower before going to bed, chilling, taking the face off, just getting off the screens, listening to music. I use sprays on my pillow. I've got this beautiful company that I discovered called the Good Night Co, and they do lovely little sort of drops under your tongue and spray on the pillow and all of those sorts of things that help support sleep, which is enormous. So number one is sleep. Number two is exercise. And getting out into fresh air. And I think that the one time that I've noticed, particularly if my stress is high, if I just will not let that go, even if it means that I have to start work a little bit later, because I've got kids with special needs, getting them off to school is always hard. And I'm lucky enough to have built into my law life the ability to start my work law life a bit later, which means it's a non-negotiable. It will happen, rain, hail or shine. I've got a treadmill that's out of the weather on my back deck where if it's raining, that's where I am. And just going for it. And it doesn't have to be a lot, I think the other thing I discovered, and I'll talk, the food side of things is really important as well. Making sure you're eating really good food, not the crap that you fill yourself with when you're in that stress state of comfort food eating, or just going, oh, I deserve this, and opening the fridge and just kind of stuffing yourself with things and then feeling bad about it. Like just being so mindful of the need to fuel your body well. So the 5 and 2 thing is something I discovered this year, that Dr. Mosley's type of eating, which is and along with that, the exercise he really talks about is that sort of hit high intensity, 10, 15 minutes of high intensity, little bit of rest, high intensity, little bit of rest. And if that's all you can manage every day, it's like a no excuses thing. Like surely we can all find just that amount of time to do those things. So sleep, exercise, and getting out in the sun is also good. So even if you can't manage to get yourself out of bed, and that's the work, you cannot even fathom exercise, or if you've got a physical issue, right, because not all of us can, just getting outside, putting your feet in the grass, bare feet in the grass, or sand between the toes, or something, even if you're just sitting in the sun for 10 minutes or so and doing some breath work, it's just the difference between, you know, your mindset being right and not. And there's so many scientific studies that show that those things are so incredibly important for us. And so, of course, the food and the nutrition side of things, and of course, water intake versus not so much alcohol intake is always a good thing. So, yeah, they're my sort of really top things. I mean, of course, on top of other things like mindfulness and other just distractions, that you can make sure that you're keeping yourself calm and doing everything you can to sort of face each day in a calm, intentional, centered way.
Thank you for sharing. Not only your own, what you do for yourself, but you did mention at the start, you know, working with clients and other lawyers, how important it is for even other lawyers to be doing this as part of their work, to be able to be doing good work for their clients too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you have been a lawyer, you've no doubt felt that sort of, you know, lurching in your guts when a certain email comes into your inbox. And, you know, our training sometimes, you know, puts us into that fight, flight, how dare you, and off we go on the, you know, on the keyboard and, you know, right back, you know, whereas if we can all just recognize that that's part of almost our negatively primed training that we've had, and we can take a breath and just try and, you know, deal with it a little bit in a little more measured way, take more time, less reaction, and try to respond well. I think it just makes the practice of law that little bit easier. Not always when you've got the worst people on the other side, but I think it's the way that you want to show up. I always say to my team, you know, you've got to be proud about the way you're going to respond. And you don't want to look back at that correspondence in 3 months or 6 months' time, or worse still, have it end up on the back of an affidavit in the front of a judge and think, oh my gosh, like I was clearly a little bit over the top there, or too aggressive, or whatever it might have been, and it didn't help my client. It just increased the conflict.
Yeah. And this starts to bring us to what collaborative practice is, I guess, and practicing law a different way, because you're very much an advocate of that, and training other lawyers to do it, and living it as an example for us to move towards that direction. So tell us some of the differences between how clients would experience a collaborative lawyer versus a more of a traditional approach.
So the collaborative law concept is one where it takes a far more holistic view of the problem and sees it more to be a human problem with a legal overlay, rather than a legal problem that can only be solved in a legal way. Now, a lot of clients come to us with a legal problem, but a lot of the time, the things that are really important to the clients might not actually be relevant at law. And so the traditional legal approach is a very reductive one. And I often use the example of like a funnel where we operate through a case law lens. That's how we're trained as lawyers, you know, and those cases come out of the 3% of the most dysfunctional court matters that can't be settled in any other way. And we like to apply that 3% of precedent, to which is fact specific anyway, to the 97% of matters that could be resolved in a different way. And our court systems are generally geared to be, you know, procedural, and will set a flow of things that will happen, that once they're commenced, there's a series of steps that will inevitably flow. And although about 20 years ago, mediation became a new fandangled thing that we were all having to learn about, in many jurisdictions, and not all, because family court has seen the light and started to make people do mediations early, but in many jurisdictions, those mediations are very late stage, last ditch effort, trying to save the cost bleed, and end up being done in shuttle because people can't even talk to each other anymore. And it's literally trying to do a horse trade, and it's not a satisfying result. It's a settlement. where compromises are made. And in fact, sometimes lawyers tell their clients that everyone should feel like they've given too much, and that's the sign of a good settlement. Well, I just think all of that's rubbish. And I think if we, not rubbish, it's got a place. Obviously, it's got a place. And clearly, as a lawyer who has wanted to try and keep people out of court, I have used those processes and still to this day use them. But the collaborative process is very different because it tries to take a holistic problem-solving approach from the very beginning before any court proceedings are initiated, or if they are initiated, they're done to preserve a statute of limitations period and then kind of put off to the side so that the families can focus and the lawyers can focus and the financial can focus and the communications coach can all focus on helping the family try to find their human solution. That might not be strictly inside the parameters of, you know, the legal funnel that we would ordinarily push people through. They still need to consider those legal aspects. But if someone wants to make a decision because family is more important to them, or they don't feel like they need as much into their future life, or they're willing to let go so that they've got other things that they value, who are we to say that that shouldn't happen? Really, it's about helping families and people navigate that in a way that suits their ultimate purpose. But that said, I think for clients, it's very different because sometimes they come to lawyers and they want us to give them the solution to the problem. Mm-hmm. And it's different because we put the problem back in the client's lap in the sense that we say, but this is your problem, this is your family. How are you going to help us solve this with you rather than for you? So it makes people then have to kind of be a bit more active in, but therefore have much more control over the settlement. You know, it makes you be a bit more active. And then I guess you have a team of people working with you and scaffolding you rather than, and you still be in control of that and in a controlled way so that your family and you don't come to fisticuffs either. It's designed to sort of reduce conflict, but to let everyone try and work out what suits them and their family the best.
It brings me back to when doing your training, we spoke about what a traditional lawyer might sort of do in an initial appointment with someone and how they prime them towards a certain way of thinking as well. Whereas in being trained as a lawyer, we don't even question that we do that to someone. They come to us and, as you say, they sort of hand their life and their problem over to us and go, here you go. And we say, okay, well, this is how we're going to go about fixing it, and take the power away from them, and they're not even project managing it or even. And we prime them to expect a certain percentage because they say, well, what are my rights? Well, you know, based on the worst 3%, these are your rights.
Yeah. That's it. And they want to know what they're entitled to. And again, something that you might be entitled to at law might actually not be what you need in your human life. And I think having the unique part of having the financial advisors involved, it allows people to shift away from this idea of I'm entitled to a percentage of a pie, you know, and that's what I'm going for, and I won't look at anything else. And it's that whole idea of trying to find that win-win, you know, in the orange scenario where someone might actually value having the juice out of the orange, someone might value having the pits out of the orange, someone else might want the rind, you know, and then it's never as easy as this or that, but sometimes it's a way of trying to work out how what a piece of money and the timing of the receipt of that money might have for your impact of your future, looking at it that way, rather than going, well, what's here right now and this is what I'm going to get and that's what I'm entitled to, rather than looking at it in a bigger picture and saying, well, if I could have my future in my ideal situation, what would be most important to me? How would I like to live my life forward, and what would I like to achieve? For some people, that might mean having the financial security of an asset, a roof over their head. For other people, and particularly in grief, I see this happen where people just shift. Their value sets will shift away from the hard saving and scrimping and saving, and they've just lost a loved one, and then they go, oh my gosh, life's really short. I don't want that. I want to travel. I want to go and spend money. I want to go and visit my family. I want to do all those things. But if we don't stop long enough to ask the questions and even allow our clients enough time to process what the answer to those questions is, because that can be difficult. And in the space that I work in, but whenever you're in conflict, unless you've got that ability to just coach people through taking the time out, be able to try and look forward. And in grief, it's really hard because, you know, their landscape as they know it has changed, and all of the markers of the things that they thought that they might do and the retirement plans that they had or whatever else it might be could all be out the door. So people have to take a little while about working that through. And again, having that financial person, and they're often the ones who are doing that with everyday people all the time. You know, they ask those questions. Where do you see yourself in 10 years or 20 years? And what do you want that, you know, to look like? And how do you see you want to live your life forward? So having that integration with that type of mindset helps clients open out their idea of what their future might be, and they become less about the piece of the pie and the percentage and more about what that might mean in their actual life, which I think is so much more important to the humans.
Yeah, absolutely. It was such a surprise to me that it was such a blind spot for so many years that we would take clients through such significant decisions without having financial advice.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, but it's even also that initial consultation. I think when, as lawyers, we think clients are coming to us to give them the answer or give them advice. And particularly if we charge them for that first, you know, initial consultation, it feels like we've got to deliver value by the way of legal advice. Whereas most clients, particularly when I've changed the way we interview in our first interview, our interview is far less about providing legal advice and far more about talking about the pathways that might be open to the client going from now, addressing, of course, their burning immediate concerns, you know, so that we can address to say, you're not going to lose your house. It's going to be okay. You know, there's a way forward here. We just have to work out which pathway is going to suit you and your family the best. All they want is that wise counsel from us. And it's actually less about the provision of legal advice, and it's far more about, okay, now I can see my next step.
Yeah.
Or an option of pathways that I have the control over to decide, rather than having a system of litigation imposed upon me, which is, you know, let's face it, we know as lawyers is only going to escalate the conflict. And while some of us are pretty good collegiate lawyers and we pick up the phone, we still have a tendency to sit in that driver's seat of the settlement that we all know is going to be, because we know the case law. Mate, you know, we know how this is going to end, so let's do a deal. Like, we just take control of it for the client rather than necessarily finding out what's most important to the client.
Well, let alone having them also, I suppose, have some agency and build some skill in, you know, negotiating and settling too, because by them seeing a team of collaborative people work together, it may be a skill that they've never seen demonstrated before as well. And if they want an ongoing relationship with the family that they're in dispute with, this can teach them how to resolve future problems too, can't it?
Oh, 100%. And that's sometimes when I explain the differences between the pathways to the clients, I will say this pathway is probably the only one that has the potential to improve your relationships. Because you will learn some of those skills. And who teaches them? Yeah. We're not taught these things at school. They're modeled to us in our family.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's why it's so important. So they're some of the questions I ask in those initial interviews. How's the family dynamic? How have you handled conflict in the past? Have you done it well? Have you done it badly? What do you think went wrong last time? Could you have a conversation? And, you know, a lot of the time people are we're conflict averse. We don't like to jump in there and, you know, have that. But if we know that we're going to be scaffolded in a way that still allows us to have our voice, have our say what's important to us, and air some of the things that we, and particularly in the estates world, know are sometimes these underlying drivers that are silent, hidden things that we don't even know about. You know, it's the history since the beginning of time in the family where someone feels that, you know, they were not the favourite, or someone else was the favourite, or they were, you know, this happened, or someone took over the caring responsibilities, or whatever it might be. There's a whole lot of resentment that sort of sits there unsaid in families sometimes. And, you know, they are the things that sometimes can block people from, or block people from reaching resolution, or amplify the conflict if it gets too close to that. So again, that's why having the communications person, who's usually a psychologist and has an idea around grief and communications, is there to help people be able to share how they're feeling about those things, or what's important to them, so that again there's a created understanding between each other to say, okay, so I get that. I see how that's important to you. This is important to me, but maybe there is a way that we can both get, or all get, the things that are important to us to work, you know, and then there's no need to actually hate each other's guts for life. Yeah, but it's true. It's really true. And I think, again, as lawyers, we can learn a lot from each other by actually behaving as problem solvers rather than as aggressive opposite sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And learning a lot from the financial planners, and then learning a lot from the psychologists, because we as lawyers, again, I suppose, tend to think that we're great communicators. But
right.
Yes,
We are. Everything.
good at everything. That's right. But the element that the communication coach can bring often teaches the professionals a lot too, as well as the participants in the family. Oh my God.
100%. Absolutely. And I think, I mean, that's one thing that with the collaborative work that's beginning in the wills and estate space, because we have a much larger team, having that communications coach is great, because us lawyers do tend to revert to type sometimes, and we, you know, start to see things from that legal perspective all the time, or whatever it might be. And it's good to have that person involved to help us all be able to keep our communications going smoothly as well, because it's so important, as you said, to model that to the families. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So tell us what you're so passionate about with collaborative practice. I mean, we've talked so much about the differences. What are you seeing in terms of results and feedback that you're getting from it?
Yes. So it is getting quite exciting. We're starting to, there are regular beginnings, onboarding of matters happening. I certainly know about them. We've got one about to onboard this week ourselves in Queensland, so it's very exciting. So look, I think the thing is that it's the positive aspect comes actually from the families that we work with. It's just it's funny, when we did the training and we were videoing our role play training, the videographers sort of were like, isn't this what happens all the time? And we're like, no, it's not what happens all the time. But it makes so much sense to the layperson to have their matter dealt with this way, particularly if they're all getting on reasonably well. There's no need to, you know, to go down a litigation pathway. And I think, again, it's just in the estates context, if you're able to unlock the estate itself to be able to fund the process, it completely evens out the power imbalance that sometimes can happen for people who can't afford to, run a matter themselves and things like that. So there are those sorts of aspects as well, that it makes it just that, you know, to have to deal with that when you've lost a loved one is hard enough, let alone having the financial stress and strain and the stress and strain of a conflict on top. But the other part that's really exciting in the estates context is that succession planning sort of space, where those rural families or family businesses are starting to see the value in having that more holistic approach, so that, again, you don't sort of have a person doing it and then taking them off to the lawyer, and the lawyer goes, hang on a minute, that's not how it's going to get done, and, you know, just mucking it all up for everybody. So it's good to have everyone involved in that mix. So that's really exciting. What am I passionate about? At the moment, my big focus for next year is trying to help more. We've got 120 people trained in Australia in the wills and estates context. So I'm really keen to help build and really build up our resource base so that we've all got a way in which we're onboarding our matters nicely, well, even training our staff to spot a collaborative matter when they do those consultations for us, and just nurturing the group that's already there. So I'm really excited about doing that, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is a wonderful new area to be able to sort of bring people and introduce people to, for sure.
Yeah.
Bringing the conversation all the way back around again, because we spoke at the beginning about what you do to get yourself through stressful periods. What are some regular self-care practices you have, or even some that you might introduce to your appointments with clients, or getting them to do for themselves as well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my book does actually go into that with clients. So I was literally going, when I was preparing for this, I'm like, what would I say? But look, some of those things I actually do. I'm very much about, you know, getting support and making sure people have got a pathway to work that stuff out. One of the things I talk about in here, which I do and use myself, is that real gratitude practice or quiet time practice for me in the morning. Even if it is having music in my ears, which is for me, because I'm, you know, I like worship music, so I use that for myself. But meditation music or something like that is great. And I think the gratitude practice is one of my clients. She's not a person of faith, but she really loves using her photography to find the beauty in every day. So on the Instagram and things like that, she does beautiful photos, you know, and it could be something as simple as, you know, sun going through a flower on its upside down, you know, that she'll get into all these weird and wonderful positions, or, you know, something sparkling on the beach, or whatever it might be. There's always something. And if she sees a little heart-shaped anything, whether it's a leaf or a rock or a shell or something, it's always sort of something she spots. And I really like that idea of that. I think there's a movement called joy spotting, where you're looking for those little things that make you smile. And I think even if you don't have the time or feel inclined to write down things that you're grateful for me, that daily practice of just, you know, centering yourself and being aware of the good things in your life, so important when you've got those dark clouds that are around the edge. And finding really good people that can distract you well. Going for walks, or, you know, just having a chat on the phone, whatever it might be, those good distractions, seeing a good movie, reading a good book. Just sometimes you need to have those little escapes as well.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I think we often think about our support people having to support the particular thing we're going through, but sometimes your support person is literally, take me out of this and go and get me to do something different.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you sometimes almost need to have that person that you can say, hey, I need to chat, or can we catch up for coffee, or whatever it might be. Yeah, and I think that's the other trouble for us as lawyers. We're such A-type personalities that we've got it all under control all the time, and we would never ask for help from anybody else because we don't need it. Rubbish. I just think that that's the important part. So again, people like listening to your spouse and listening to your parents or your friends or your other family members who are saying, hey, I mean, you know, like what's going on here is not okay, or are you okay? Just make sure that you listen to that stuff rather than just brush it under the table, because it usually means something.
Yes, they know us the most often, so we should listen, shouldn't we?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, Zinta, tell us, where can people find your book for beginning, and where do they find you if they want to work with you, or other lawyers might be listening to this as well to find out about your training?
Absolutely. So my website is resolveestatelaw.com.au, and pretty much everything is on there. The book is on there through the store, and the courses are as well through the Collaborative Practice training page there. So yeah, we're doing 2 trainings coming up, one in Sydney and one in sunny Kingscliff, which is a lovely little beach location. We're going to try out, see if we can get like a little retreat happening up there. It's a really nice location by the beach.
That sounds wonderful. Wow, get people out of their ordinary environment.
Yeah, 15 minutes from the Coolangatta airport. So you just fly in, doesn't matter where you are, from Australia, and come and join us.
Yeah. And of course, trying to get other psychologists on board as well. And
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you for your time so much, Zinta, and sharing your wisdom with our audience. As always, so wonderful.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Jackie. Thank you for inviting me, and I love the work that you're doing.